Hello everyone, my name is KrimsonKreamer, and today I wanted to talk to you about Street Fighter. It's no secret that I love the Street Fighter series, but I've never really talked about which ones are my favorite and why they are. So in today's video, that's what we're going to go over. I'm going to go over my list of my top 5 Street Fighter games. Keep in mind that this list is just purely for Street Fighter games, so no crossover games like the Marvel vs. Capcom series or SNK vs. Capcom. Those will be another video entirely. But with that out of the way, let's get started. At number 5, we have Super Street Fighter 2. This game is what got me into fighting games to begin with. I remember going over to my grandparents' house where they had my dad's old Sega Genesis with a copy of this game, and being enthralled by the game. While it's not the most graphically intense game and has some very questionable mechanics, Super Street Fighter 2 introduces the main roster of Street Fighter that most of the future titles use. It also adds some moves and mechanics to characters that define their character traits, like Ken's Flaming Shoryuken and Ryu's Red Hadouken, and even Dhalsim's Yoga Teleport. This game might not be for everyone, but it's definitely a game you should look into and play with your friends for a good time. Coming in at number 4 is Street Fighter Alpha 3. Street Fighter Alpha 3 is such a good game. It takes the mechanics from Alpha 1 and 2 and evolves them and changes the mechanics of Street Fighter in a way that will continue in future Street Fighter games. What that is the option of choice. Street Fighter Alpha 3 allows the player to choose 3 different playstyles for each character called isms. Each ism changes how each character is played. A-ism is the balanced style that gives the characters all of its specials and supers. X-ism makes the characters play with a limited move pool and have access to one super move, but does the most damage and has the weakest defense. And finally, V-ism, where the character cannot perform their super attacks in exchange for being able to use the custom combos from Alpha 2 to do insane combos. And this is also the fastest in speed and has high defense, but does the least amount of damage. With the isms, it allows players to pick the same character, but play them differently. With these isms, I can play certain characters I don't normally play. Like Charlie, who is a charge character, which I have very difficult time with. I can play him in the V-ism style, where I don't have to do his crazy super and be able to do most of his normal moves and stuff. While this title isn't the easiest to get into, it definitely sets up for some insane plays and has super fast matches, very close to most anime fighters out there like Melty Blood or Guilty Gear Strive. Coming in at number 3 is Street Fighter V. So this game is a controversial pick for me. While I have some very negative things to say about this game does have some positive traits about it that puts it at this placement. So I want to start with the things that I hate about this game. 1, it looks like stinky doo-doo. The models in these games are trying to look too realistic, and that kind of takes me out of the immersion. Street Fighter was never supposed to be a realistic looking fighting game, and I felt like they tried to implement that in this, and it really didn't work out. 2, this game focuses on the offensive style of play rather than the defensive. A lot of this game has very little defensive options, like taking away Akuma's air fireball that he can do in the air while jumping backwards. That was a staple of Akuma's character, and they took it out as a defensive option. And they also took away Dan's air Tatsu, which was good utility for him to be able to dodge certain attacks while he's in the air. They even gave Ryu a counter move that also acts like an attack that he can do in combos, and it's just more of a combo extender than it really is a counter like he has in other games. And 3, the game has a very small roster to start out with unless you buy the complete edition of the game that comes with all the characters. Unfortunately, I don't think it's fair for them to have released the game with only 16 characters at launch when you have other games like Tekken 7 that launched with at least double that amount of characters. With all the things that are wrong with this game that I talked about, let me talk about the things that I actually liked about this game. 1, it's the easiest Street Fighter game to get into. The barrier of entry for this game is super easy and good for anyone to start playing fighting games, allowing you to learn each character's moves and combos, and seeing what moves can flow into each other and make your own combos and moves for the character that you play. 2. Its multiple single-player modes. Street Fighter V has an arcade mode that allows you to feel like you're playing through every other Street Fighter game's arcade mode, which is a pretty cool, unique way to show off all the different arcade modes and go over a little bit of the history from each arcade mode, where when you finish each arcade mode with a certain character, it kind of tells their story. It has multiple story modes where it either tells the overall story of Street Fighter V and each character's individual story within Street Fighter V as well. It also has a survival mode where your health carries over each round, which is pretty cool, and you gotta try to complete that, and specific combat trials to complete that you can get extra content for, like costumes, music, and certain titles to add to your online profile. And finally, number 3, the thing that I really liked about this game is that the entire roster is full of great characters and shows the evolution for each character. Let's take a look at the characters Cody and Zeku. Cody is the main character from the series Final Fight that Capcom also made, where at the end of his game, Cody gets arrested, and we get to play as him as a prisoner starting in Street Fighter Alpha all the way up into Street Fighter 4, where now in Street Fighter 5, Cody has transitioned from a prisoner and has become the mayor of the town that he lives in and takes over the job of his former ally from Final Fight. Then there is Zeku, the master of the character named Guy from the same series as Cody, Final Fight, who also is a reference to another Capcom game, Strider, where Zeku is the Grand Master of the Bushin Ryu ninjutsu style, where Strider and Guy get their fighting styles from, and utilizes both fighting styles in this game. They even added the character Kage, who is an evolution to Evil Ryu, one of my favorite Street Fighter characters, in the same way Oni is the evolved version of Akuma. They even added the character Nash, formerly known as Charlie, who dies at the end of Street Fighter Alpha, but comes back to life in this game through magical means. Then there's Guile, who is a even higher ranked officer in the army, who ends up training one of the newest characters to the Street Fighter series, Luke, who has been dubbed the future of the Street Fighter series. Out of all the Street Fighters, I feel like this game tells its story the best, showing us the growth of old characters and the birth of new ones, and how they interact with the whole roster. Plus, with it being the most recent Street Fighter game, it's very easy to obtain and start your fighting game journey. At number 2, we have Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, the ultimate fighting game in my opinion. Street Fighter Third Strike is one of the most difficult fighting games to play, but is at the same time one of the most rewarding fighting games. This game made me want to play fighting games competitively. The intense action, stunning graphics, and balanced mechanics of both offense and defense, where the characters all have a move where if you hit medium punch and kick at the same time, performs an overhead attack that goes through crouching block, and the parry system where if you push forward at the right time, you will parry an attack and take no damage, rather than just blocking an attack and taking chip damage. If you take a look at any footage of this game, you will see some of the most intense matches ever in fighting game history. One of those matches is the ever-popular event called Evo Moment 37. Evo Moment 37 is between two of the top players in all of the FGC, Daigo Umehara and Justin Wrong. These two have been rivals in all of the Street Fighter games that they have ever played, and this time have to face each other in the final match of the Third Strike tournament at Evo, one of the biggest fighting game events in the world. Both players are fighting with all of their might, pushing each other to the limit in the intense back and forth matches, where the last round of the last match, it happens. Justin gets Daigo down to his last bit of health, to where blocking won't save Daigo from losing, as blocking an attack still does chip damage, and will give Daigo the loss. The only way for Daigo to survive is to dodge Justin's attacks or parry. As they shimmy in the middle of the arena with the crowd cheering for Justin for the win, Justin executes Chun-Li's super, where she attacks in rapid succession, where it's virtually impossible for anyone to block or even parry. But then, Daigo, harnessing all of his skills and instincts, was able to parry every single strike, and then countering with his own combo, winning the whole tournament. What makes this moment important is that up until this point, no one thought that being able to perform such a feat was ever possible. Daigo did what was thought impossible, showing us that with enough training and talent, anyone can do this. To the point that in the Third Strike Online edition, Capcom added a parry trial mode where the final level is dubbed Evo Moment 37, where you must perform the now famous Daigo parry yourself. For those who want to get into fighting games, this game is the hardest to play, but with enough practice is the most rewarding. And now finally at number 1, we have Ultra Street Fighter 4. This game to me is the perfect fighting game ever created, with having, in my opinion, the greatest roster in Street Fighter history, well-balanced game mechanics that rivals Third Strike's mechanics, and finally an art style that combines cell shading with the artistic style of Japanese ink brushing that makes all movements and moves feel like a painting that has come to life. Street Fighter 4 was the first fighting game I played competitively. This game was one that me and my friends would get together for after high school and play for hours, having the time of our lives. This game has the perfect blend of characters, with its roster being filled with both old characters from all the Street Fighter series implementing their classic fighting styles into the game, so playing characters like Dudley from Third Strike doesn't feel new or weird, but familiar and easy to get into if you've played Third Strike. And new characters who add to the story of the game with their unique fighting styles, like Abel, a man who forgot about his past and uses his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills to try to figure out his past and where he's come from. And even the character of Goken, the master of Ryu and Ken, who we only knew up until this point, was killed by Akuma but somehow survived and is now back and ready to rumble. This game also added 2 of my favorite characters to the entire series, Oni and Evil Ryu. Oni being the evolved form of Akuma, whose moveset is as intense as Akuma's, and Evil Ryu returning to the series since Street Fighter Alpha with a moveset that combines Ryu and Akuma's movesets perfectly. The mechanics of this game are on par with those of Third Strike, where by pressing medium, punch, and kick, you perform an attack called Focus Attack, where you can super armor against one attack from an enemy, taking great damage that if left alone can recover back health, but if hit a second time, your character takes all the damage, making you lose a lot of health, adding the risk-reward system to the game that makes it as intense as parrying from Third Strike. You can also dash out of the focus attack, meaning that if you take a hit from an opponent, and if you're quick enough to be able to dodge away, or to follow up on the attack to save yourself, or even use it to combine combos by performing an action known as the Focus Attack Dash Cancel, or FADC for short. I would also like to talk about some of the unique modes and settings this game has to offer. First, the arcade mode is probably one of the best in terms of stories and visual. A character's arcade mode starts with some greatly drawn scenes that look like they can belong in an anime. Then, as you play through the arcade mode, you get to face your character's rival, and it opens up in an in-game cutscene where it further extends your character's story, and then once you beat it, you get an animated cutscene with the same style as the scenes from the beginning, and it just looks so good. Also, if you're good enough to finish through the arcade mode without losing a match and getting enough perfects, you get to face Boss Akuma like in Super Street Fighter 2. A pretty decent callback if I do say so myself. The other thing I wanted to talk about this game is the system called Edition Select. Edition Select allows you to play specific builds of the characters from the previous versions of Street Fighter 4. Basically Street Fighter 4, Super Street Fighter 4, and Ultra Street Fighter 4. But it also adds another edition called Omega Mode, where the characters are given new moves and combos, making them virtually broken. It's an insane build to the game that adds a level of fun and intensity that you can't get anywhere else. Ultra Street Fighter 4 is truly one of the greatest fighting games of all time, and my favorite Street Fighter game to date. I would highly recommend getting this game if you can. You will not regret it. And with that, those are my top 5 favorite Street Fighter games. What did you think? What are your favorite Street Fighter games, and what other lists would you like me to make? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like what you see, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It would greatly help the channel out. And if you want to help out even more, consider becoming a member of the channel. It would help me out immensely. Well, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you all next time, and as always, good gaming, God bless, go beyond, and keep on keeping on.